I'm Bethany Young, and I'm the composer of Endpoint Feral. This was a fun project for me because, for a number of reasons. One, I had to imagine this piece could be played by infinite number of clarinetists. And two, it needed to be for any clarinet configuration, well, of bass clarinet, E flat, A, and B flat. So it's a duo, but it can be for two bass clarinets or a bass clarinet and E flat, and so forth. So those were kind of interesting challenges for me in approaching this piece. And then, usually when I'm composing, I collaborate very closely with a certain clarinet or certain performer that I know I'm composing for. But I had to make this piece something that's quite, you could say, I don't want to say recondite, but certainly eccentric, something that could be managed by any clarinetist for the most part. So that was very challenging. And so fortunately, my husband is himself, he's primarily a composer, but he studied clarinet. And so we have a clarinet in the apartment, and I was able to compose the piece working with the clarinet, getting it in my hands and my mouth, putting my breath through the instrument in various capacities to get what I wanted. And then what I couldn't do myself, I could at least confer with him, or at least he knew someone or knew enough about the instrument to answer my questions. So that was very helpful. I tend to like to have the instruments available that I'm composing for because I'm a very hands-on composer, and then fill in the gaps that, being that I am not a clarinetist, fill in the gaps from there with a close collaborator. So in thinking about the concept of this piece, I really was fascinated by this imagining of a person, sort of primal setting, this sort of cave person stumbling upon a clarinet for the first time. And what would that be? What would the sonic outcome be of that? And so there's this dissemblage component of the piece, taking apart the instrument and almost looking at it, or playing around and experimenting with the sounds that each piece offers. They become instruments in and of themselves, but also this aspect of the voice, the vocalizations into the instrument. And so both of these things and a lot of the guttural sounds that come out of the instrument are sort of heightened, a sort of heightened corporeal form of expression. So, taking apart the instrument is very physical, and so you see that sort of human aspect of taking it apart. So it's not just about the objects themselves, but the instigator or performer interacting with those objects, and then the voice coming through, which is such a fundamentally human thing. To vocalize. And I myself am a vocalist, so I like to have fun making weird vocalizations in instruments. And then the other aspect of this piece is the text. So I really like poetry and I like to write poetry, but text in this piece sort of, I'm using these little clauses almost as symbols. So there's feeling for nothing is one of them. We are not prone. Your endpoint is feral. I am your endpoint. Eat the disaster. Ungraspable. Back off. And all these little phrases kind of refract and reverberate off of each other and create this image that interacts with this otherwise atavistic sort of setting, you could say. So those are some of the ideas behind the piece. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you so much to Bethany Young for sharing her thoughts with us and her compositional inspirations. I wanted to start first by looking at the score and briefly talking about the particular instrumentation options available for this piece. So as Bethany said, there are multiple configurations available, and these options help bring the New Works Project Consortium their mission to life by providing exponentially portable and flexible scoring options. This allows more people to perform the work, and it allows them to have freedom to use what instruments and parts they have available. So the 4 options that you have are up here. All of the upper clarinet parts can be any configuration of A, B flat, or E flat. Today, Cassandra and I will be performing the scoring for upper clarinet 1 and bass clarinet 2, which is the lower option you see on the screen. We tried several of these options and enjoyed having the lower bass clarinet part on the bottom and the upper clarinet parts on top. We thought this combination of instruments offered the greatest contrast of timbres, colors, auxiliary sounds, and range. The selections you make here are going to determine the types of extended techniques you work and alternate playing styles that you'll go ahead and use throughout the piece. While there's some overlap, the bass clarinet parts tend to have different options from the upper clarinet, and because everyone will make a different set of decisions here and moving forward, every performance will expectedly sound different. On this next slide, we can see that the instrument deconstruction that takes place for both instruments and how they're notated in the score. There's considerable playing, speaking, and/or percussive parts that happen on the mouthpiece with or without a reed, barrel, neck, or any combination of those instrument parts. The options for that is the figure on the top right of the screen. The score is very clearly labeled as you go through, but the player needs to practice that deconstruction part seamlessly to avoid accidental hazard, which is a fear for many of us clarinetists. The other option is, for some of the really fast changes, is to have an alternate set of instrument parts available to you. For example, when I play the bass clarinet part, I'm going to deconstruct my instrument a couple of different times to use my mouthpiece, reed, and neck. However, there are other parts where I'm going to be playing on a bass contra neck that will be easily available right next to me. Cassandra has also opted to have some alternate instrument parts ready to go, but will deconstruct her instrument depending on the score instructions. Perhaps the most interesting part of the deconstruction happens for the bass clarinet player. In the bottom example here, this is where this section begins in the score, and the player is asked to play only on the upper joint of the bass clarinet. To do this, the player needs to seal the bottom of the joint with their right hand and make sure to close and seal all keys. When playing this part, the player needs to use a trumpet embouchure and buzz into the open top of the upper clarinet joint to create a sound. So if you've played like this before, you know what it's going to sound like. We're going to leave it as a surprise for everyone in the performance in case you don't. On this next slide, this is the key that you want to have with you at all times. This will examine some of the additional playing and extended techniques used. Some of these symbols are quite widely used in contemporary music, but there are some that you'll notice you might not recognize, and that's because they've been devised just for this piece. So before attempting to play it, we suggest that you look through the key of symbols and carefully think about how to apply each one. In many cases, there's going to be 2 to 3 techniques that are being used at once. This key of symbols should be kept handy and used as a reference, particularly in the early parts of the rehearsal process. We do not recommend trying to play the piece without looking at this guide first. While we don't have enough time to walk through all the symbols, there are a few extended techniques that will help prepare you for playing the piece. The first one is that you need to be able to sing and vocalize into your instrument while playing both the instrument and just the mouthpiece and barrel. So you'll need to go from creating really high-pitched sounds to low-pitched sounds, and that will be something you'd like to revisit before doing this. The second is flutter tonguing. It's quite prominent in both parts. The third is being able to buzz into the open parts of your instrument using a brass or trumpet-like embouchure to create a loud sound. So if you've not played a brass instrument, that will be something you'd like to visit as well. You also need one really good speaking multiphonic, and that should be based off the fundamental E. Bethany is not really descriptive with which multiphonic she wants you to use, so you have a lot of options when getting to that component. Those are the main things that you'll want to practice from the symbol sheet before attempting to perform the work. Hopefully you were able to look through the symbol list just a little bit more while I was talking, because there's certainly a lot of information on there. On this last slide that you see, this last slide shows a score sample that allows you to get an idea of what the reading of the score will look like. You can see that the players read off the same part, and because there's no real meter or sense of time, you need to work together to vertically line up the parts, as what is done in many contemporary scores. When looking at this score, you can also see the layering of individual parts that is occurring and how learning the symbols and thinking about how you want to execute them is key to understanding this piece. So at this time, Dr. Hibbard and I are going to be performing Endpoint Feral by Bethany Young for you. We hope that you can begin to hear and process how some of these symbols are used throughout the music. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us for this performance of Endpoint Feral by Bethany Young. We hope you enjoyed it and enjoy the rest of the New Music Festival. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.